If you're an entrepreneur, there are three things that are going to be top of mind in 2024. The culture war, inflation, and the never-ending competitive nature of business. This is Pain Points, where the world meets business. What is up, Pain Points listeners? Welcome back to another episode. I'm Darius Bell. This is my co-host, Samson Jagoras, and this is Pain Points, where the world meets business. Today, this Tuesday, December 5th, we're going to jump into Lady Ballers, Warren Buffett on inflation. We're going to talk about TikTok and strategically operating in unwelcome territories. And we'll cap it off with Steve Jobs talking about customer experience. So welcome. Samson, how are you, bro?
Good, man. We're in the new studio at the new office, which is nice.
It is.
A little brighter, a little bigger than the last one.
A little brighter, a little bigger, but our couch shrunk along the way.
Couch shrunk, but that's because we've been getting special requests to have ebony and ivory in one shot. And so here we are, ebony and ivory in one shot.
But we have just enough room and
for the Holy Spirit.
We have enough room for the Holy Spirit, but as C-Rock put it, this is the not gay gap. Which I love that. I never heard of it, and that's my thing now. Do not infringe upon this.
That's your side of the couch, bro.
All right.
This is my side of the couch.
Okay, so I asked you before we started, did you hear about Lady Ballers, and you hadn't?
I don't know who that is. Maybe I have once you talk about it, but...
Well, Lady Ballers is a feature film that came out from our not friends yet at the Daily Wire, and they put out this movie that premiered, and people are losing their minds for all good reasons and some bad reasons. And we're going to play a trailer just because so you can familiarize yourself with it. We won't necessarily put it on the pod just for audio, different things. I don't want to get clipped for that. But I want you to watch the trailer, and then we're going to come back and rap about that from a business and personal perspective.
All right. Oh, man, that's good.
Okay, so we're back. We checked out the trailer off behind the scenes here. Had a good chuckle. But there's an article that was released from the Conservative News Daily, so we know where they lean. But I just want to read this to you as we jump into this first article here from Jeremy Boring, the CEO, I think he's a co-founder. He's not the active CEO, but
of the Daily Wire.
Of the Daily Wire. So the highly anticipated film Lady Ballers has made a groundbreaking debut on the Daily Wire Plus platform, which I think is awesome because it's in-house. You know, they didn't go national theaters, none of that.
Yep.
Lady Ballers is a feature-length comedy that cleverly satirizes transgender ideology and the leftist agenda of allowing men who identify as women to compete in women's sports. The Daily Wire premiered this movie Friday night. Jeremy Boring expressed his gratitude on Twitter, saying, "Thank you to everyone who helped give Lady Ballers the biggest launch in Daily Wire Plus history. It's been the best launch day for new subscriptions, received outstanding reviews. They got 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. And the online buzz is off the charts. But 97% approval rating, 1,000 plus reviews in 24 hours. And to you, my friend, I wanted to tee this up with, what do you think about a move like this by the Daily Wire from a business standpoint? Mm-hmm. And then how do you think about that just personally when we think about like leading with values?
Yeah, I got a couple things to say about it. The first thing is you're going to see a lot more of this. People creating content for their audience based off of what they believe about the world. And so the biggest challenge that we're up against right now is the majority of Hollywood is owned by the leftist, liberal, uber liberal crowd. And people are tired of it. And so I once read an article that was talking specifically about this concept called parallel structures. And so when you look at totalitarian governments, the number one way to overcome totalitarian governments was not to try to go and change the existing government. It was to create a parallel structure. So, for example, if you didn't like the way the NFL played football, you could go start the Canadian Football League, which allows 12 instead of 11, allows backwards motion during football. You could have different rules and then go build your own league. Don't try to change the rules in the NFL. Go start your own. And so I think it's very wise from the Daily Wire to create content. I know for myself specifically, it can be very challenging to find content that aligns with my values, let alone things that I feel comfortable or confident that my kids can watch, and not be exposed to things that we just don't believe or are not godly or in alignment with what we believe from our biblical worldview.
Right.
And so the Daily Wire understands that, and they're building content to support that, and they're going to make a lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
And if you want to beat it, then you're going to have to go create a movie to counter that, basically.
Yeah. Which will flop, by the way.
Correct.
But I think it's also interesting. I love the fact that what they are doing is leading the charge of what I think carving out a whole new entire thing of, it's not new, novel, but they are spearheading it of like, let's go high production.
Yeah.
But let's also be real about this and touch on these real issues and make it to a point where people can digest it and view it. And I think it's a great.
Well, one of the CEO, current CEO, as a part of the Chick-fil-A family, they're actually starting a competing Hollywood quality studio in Atlanta to go heads up with Hollywood. And so these are actually starting to pop up all over the place. So you got obviously the Daily Wire doing high quality production. You got the Chick-fil-A studios. It escapes me at the moment. Maybe C-Rock, you can find those details when you post edit that, pull it in here. And then there's one more that's starting out of actually California of all places, where Hollywood is, that's trying to go heads up with this. So you're just going to see more and more parallel structures. Stop trying to change Hollywood. Go create something else.
Yeah, and it's like fundamental principle of business, right? And capitalism. Like the market will tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to, in order to build a great company, you don't have to own the whole market.
Yeah.
But if you are very specific about your niche, there's a concept called the law of diffusion of innovation, right? And so it says that the mass market won't accept something until somebody else has done it first. So when you're thinking about business and building a company, oftentimes we try to jump into the deep end of the pool when really we should be focused on finding the people whose values align with our values. So you have 2.5% of the population that's the innovators. You have 13.5% of the population that are the early adopters. And so if they can get enough momentum, put out good high quality movies from their tribe, the 13.5% that get it and share the same values, then the rest of the market will begin to adopt it.
I love it. Well, let's switch gears. Let's talk about inflation. So inflation is it's near the top of many people's minds.
Yep.
And across X recently, some wording from 2011, Warren Buffett gave his solution to how he would fix inflation in the United States. And many people have heard it, but again, it began recirculating in recent days on X, formerly Twitter. By the way, I feel like, have you ever noticed how many people still call it Twitter?
Yeah.
I think it's so funny.
They're like trying to explain to the market what it is.
It's like, maybe, I'm not criticizing. I just think it's
it was a long-standing brand. But
yeah. I just think he's playing long game with that.
He does not care.
No, he does not at all. All right. So Warren Buffett's financial plan comes by way of Yahoo Finance to eliminate America's debt. He says, I can end the deficit in 5 minutes. Okay, Warren Buffett, renowned investor and business tycoon, is no stranger to sharing his insight on various economic and fiscal issues. In an interview with Becky Quinn on CNBC, Buffett proposed a daring strategy for addressing the persistent problem of America's deficit. Now, this is in 2011. Buffett states, I could end the deficit in 5 minutes. You just pass a law that says anytime there's a deficit of more than 3% of GDP, all sitting members of Congress are ineligible for re-election. Mm-hmm. And again, this has been recirculating, but at the core of this blip from him is accountability. Mm-hmm. And so my question to you, as business leader, CEO, running multiple businesses, when you think about the upstart, the growing entrepreneur, the one who's 1 year, 2 years in, how would you advise them to view their relationship with accountability?
It's interesting. Most people don't know this, but a lot of the rules that Congress makes don't apply to them, right? Specifically as it relates to taxes. So they're excluded from a lot of these tax brackets and laws. And so there's a saying, and I don't know who said it, but I'm sure we've all heard it. Everybody has good intentions until they realize they can vote themselves a raise, right? So if you're an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, you're generally the last one to eat, not the first one, at least if you want the company to grow and be successful. You can definitely have a, keep it small, keep it all type of mentality, but you're never going to build a great company doing that.
Right.
And so what's different than from Congress to entrepreneurship is the market will immediately respond and tell you, right? You become overwhelmed, burnt out. People will feel undervalued, underpaid, or whatever it might be. And you're the only one that's really can be held accountable for that. Because when you become an entrepreneur, you're staking the flag and saying, hey, I'm responsible for everything, whether good, bad, or indifferent happens. And A players think that way also, right? It's just in general, like, this is nobody's responsibility but mine. So I think entrepreneurship, one of the prerequisites is extreme personal accountability. I don't know what else to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I bring it up because, you know, I've seen it. I've had to come through the transition myself of you want control, you want freedom.
Right.
But one thing that gets missed in the sexification of entrepreneurship is accountability. You know, you think, oh, I'm going to run this business, but do you also realize you're the employee of the business?
Yeah.
Right? Which incurs accountability, right? So those things. And so I guess my second question would be, when you think about advising leaders, how can they begin to facilitate accountability coming from the top down throughout the organization, making that a principle of the organization?
I mean, obviously just making it a part of your core values, of your culture. But there's a great saying, right? What gets measured gets done. And so I think most people in an organization are doing what they feel is the right thing. But when you have a scorecard or a metric that everybody's held accountable to, then that pretty much clarifies the outcome goal that you're looking for from that person. And so it doesn't really matter how we get there, but as long as we get there, everybody understands we're clear that that's the metric by which they're being measured, whether that's revenue, new sales, amount of leads, amount of impressions, output of content, number of times emails were checked. All those things matter. So it is our responsibility to it's like a river with banks, right? To kind of guide everybody in the right direction of where they're going and what they need to do inside of the organization.
Yeah. But
a lot of people don't do that.
No.
Newer entrepreneurs don't do that.
Well, I was just thinking, too, one of the things that holds people back from accountability or having that be something that spreads throughout their organization is the uncomfortable nature of some of the conversations you may end up having to have.
Right.
And something we've talked about in recent, probably the last 7 months that we've seen even on our team, we've had great conversations where we stress to each other, the issue is not the same as you. Like, you are not the issue in the organization, whether there's, a performance lacking or whatever it is, you are not the issue. And so it gives us this cushion to address this as a team and still be and remain a team, because the issue in the scorecard or the metric is not you.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you're just the person that's leading the charge.
Right.
If you're not able to get through it or get it done, then you need some help. And so let's figure it out, because at the end of the day, we're all partners in getting this thing done. But just because there's an issue does not mean that you are the issue.
Yeah.
Just means we need to change the way that we're doing it. Now, that's where accountability comes in, because everybody should be comfortable and confident to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm not hitting the mark, or I need help here, or whatever it might be.
Right. Correct. I love it. Now let's talk about TikTok. So TikTok in Indonesia. So this is going to be an interesting article. We may get through about 80% of it. It was a little bit long in nature, but this comes by way of the Financial Times. TikTok nears deal with Indonesia's GoTo to restart e-commerce business.
GoTo is the business, right?
GoTo is the business in Indonesia. They're saying, okay, well, we're not welcomed in your country. We're going to find our way into competing in your country by doing business with those who do business in your country.
Right.
And I just think that's an interesting point to note from a strategic standpoint, as we have many people here saying we should be done with TikTok, we should do different things. But should we take such measures? Nothing outside of other regulatory laws and intervention stops a company from getting in bed with businesses within your own country. And now it's the same thing as that company operating in the first place.
Yeah. So I was in Atlanta this last weekend, and I went to the Coca-Cola Museum, and you kind of go through the whole experience, and it's all about Coca-Cola, and they sell like 1.9 billion beverages per day in 200 different countries. At the very end, you get to go to the tasting room, kind of like you're doing a whiskey tasting or something. You're at the distillery, and it's every top Coca-Cola-owned beverage from around the world, with a little note on like which country it's the top seller in. So like In Thailand, it was Fanta, cucumber flavored Fanta.
Never heard of it, by the way. It sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. In Italy, it was a product called Beverly, which was kind of tasted more like a cream soda. Italians love their cream soda. But the way that happened was Coca-Cola was trying to increase their distribution, and when they didn't have distribution into a market, instead of trying to compete head to head with the brand, they would just go buy the brand. And then from there, they would get distribution. They would own that distribution channel, and then they would move Coca-Cola, the core product, into that distribution channel. So they own the product and they own the distribution, which created like an ecosystem, which is actually what I just talked about in this month's Pain to Profits newsletter, was about the importance of controlling product distribution on your own platform. And so they were the first to really pioneer global scale distribution of beverages and sodas and so on and so forth. The story was in 1919, they got a $25 million loan to quote unquote take the company public. And they paid it off in 6 years with interest. Mind you, this average Coca-Cola was selling for 5 cents a bottle back then.
That's a lot of bottles.
It was a lot of bottles of soda, right? So I think strategically, part of why we're so focused on Clearly Acquired and what we're doing there is there's this great wealth transfer. So rather than trying to break into a new market or own somebody else's market share, just buy the brand and own the market share. So unless at least in the United States, for example, the SEC came in or something, or other government agencies came in to try to stop that from happening, it's going to happen, and it could happen slowly, then subtly, and all of a sudden they own tons of this company.
Yeah, I mean, it was worth noting when you think about our landscape of just like that's part of the beauty of business.
Yeah, exactly. M&A strategy, right?
Yeah, you can compete with the best of them. So, but we should take note of that just as that's happening. It's like a wave moving our way, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We take note of that as entrepreneurs. All right, we're going to close her down on customer experience.
Okay.
This is essential to entrepreneurs. This is essential to business success. I don't know if I can name a company that has found success without customer experience being a priority, that has really done something well.
Right.
And so we're going to look at the legendary Steve Jobs. Now, the context of this clip is he faces some criticism in this clip early on, where the guy's pretty snarky. But watch Steve's response, and you guys listen to it.
Yes.
Mr. Jobs, you're a bright and influential man.
Here it comes.
It's sad and clear that on several counts you've discussed, you don't know what you're talking about. I would like, for example, for you to express in clear terms how, say, Java, in any of its incarnations, addresses the ideas embodied in OpenDoc. And when you're finished with that, perhaps you could tell us what you personally have been doing for the last 7 years.
You can please some of the people some of the time, but one of the hardest things when you're trying to affect change is that people like this gentleman are right in some areas. I'm sure that there are some things OpenDoc does, probably even more that I'm not familiar with, that nothing else out there does. And I'm sure that you can make some demos, maybe a small commercial app that demonstrates those things. The hardest thing is, how does that fit in to a cohesive, larger vision that's going to allow you to sell $8 billion, $10 billion of product a year? And one of the things I've always found is that you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. And I know that it's the case. And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that. And I think that's the right path to take.
3 things to say on that. That was an old video. Sorry for the scratchiness. 2, did you see my man's pants? Ooh, the acid wash with the black patches on them. Ooh wee. Steve Jobs was fashion. His style didn't change much other than he moved away from patches on his pants and acid wash to black shirt with jeans was his look. But the first thing I noticed is the guy that got out there and spoke is clearly like an engineer type. And engineers tend to have that problem where they're like kind of arrogant about the quality of the technology because they don't understand law of diffusion of innovation, which is 2.5% of the population is the the innovators, and 13.5% of the population is the early adopters. And the mass market won't buy something until somebody else has done it first. And it doesn't matter how revolutionary it is, if you can't get to the 13.5% to adopt and create a product that can be adopted by the mass market, nobody cares. So engineers tend to be like, it's got to be 100% perfect before we can ship, or at least they used to be, instead of being like, hey, 80%, it's good enough.
Right.
And here's the end goal is it's about the customer, not about, it's kind of like crypto or Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a good example of it is the mass market does not understand Bitcoin. They're terrified of it because they don't understand technology, the technology of it. So the first thing they always say is, well, couldn't it be hacked? It's like, do you understand how hard, we can't even get half of the country to agree on who should be president, let alone get 90+% of consensus from all the shareholders or all the stakeholders of Bitcoin in order to change the code. It's so big and so long, it's gone on for so long that it's impenetrable. The only place you can get hacked is if you keep it on your own phone and you don't have good password protection, right? So I think he's spot on. I mean, I think if you start with the customer and work backwards, that's always going to be the best solution. I think people tend to go the other way of like, I'm really good at this service, so I'm going to push this service to the market and then try to convince people to buy it. And that's in the marketing, we would call that the offer.
Right.
So what is the offer kind of wrapped up in our product, and how do we deliver that to the customer? And then let's go work backwards and build that thing.
I love it. What are the irony was when we were preparing for this episode, you were having a hiccup with your iPhone.
Customer experience issue.
He was having a customer experience issue. It was a technology issue producing a customer experience issue.
It was. I have a bunch of different emails, so I have them all forward to one email now. And so I was removing an old email that had been on my phone for a long time that I don't really need anymore because everything pushes to my main one. And when I deleted that, all of the contact information was somehow associated with the email account, not necessarily with the phone or the cloud itself. And so it, for a period of time, wiped out all my contacts. So I was just getting text with phone numbers, no names. Yeah. So I had to add it back. It still hasn't fixed the problem.
Well, Tim.
Yeah, buddy.
Tim, this is a customer experience issue linked to technology. So maybe there's many of you out there have had this similar experience. Drop a like, leave a comment if that's you.
And the newest one, have you seen with the new update? Where when you try to send an email, if it's over a certain number of characters, it throws a dash in there. No. So it throws a dash for the user who sent it. So they think the email's wrong, but the person that received it, it's right. So they're like, oh, I'm sorry, there's no dash in there. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no dash in the email. They still see the dash, but I don't see the dash. It's somehow screwed up. So, but anyways, that's a nuanced thing. Yeah. Like you're always going to be troubleshooting bugs and issues with new rollouts of stuff.
But the main crux of today is, as we close down, is there's a culture war. There's ideas. There's leading with value. There's competition.
Yep.
Inflation. These things, accountability, and then TikTok, competition, usurping, getting around the rules, open game of market.
Infinite game. The game's always changing. You just got to adapt to it.
And then closing down with a focus on customer experience for you entrepreneurs out there. If you treat the customer better than your competition, you got a shot, always.
Yeah, if you get focused on your competition, you'll lose.
So with that being said, whether you're here or in Indonesia, the world is going to meet your business. I'm Darius, this is Samson, and this is Pain Points.
Peace.